Hey, look at this. I think I just found a hidden page in Synth One because this thing, you can't reach it in any conventional way when you're using the normal graphical user interface. But this thing, this extra page, contains a compressor and some other stuff I don't really recognize. I don't know if it's supposed to be here. And I even asked Matthew Fecher about it, but he wouldn't tell me. So if you want to know how to get to this hidden page, just stick with me and we'll get there. Hello and welcome to attaQ. My name is Jakob. I'm your host and you're watching a attaQ episode. This is Audiokit Synth One. It's the first free open source pro synthesizer to be released on the App Store. Open source meaning that any other developer can grab the entire code for this thing and use it to build their own stuff. Who knows what will come from this? What I want to do is to break it down and have a look at all of the different various parts that make up Synth One. Okay, so the absolute first thing we're going to have a look at is how to find that hidden page with the compressors and stuff. I found it by accident while clicking about in the About page. You see, I did ask Matthew Fecher about this, one of the developers for this awesome project, and he just didn't want to say.
That's a great question. Obviously,
what you do is you click on the About Me page and then you go to the Audiokit Synth One thing up here and you press that and you get a whole new page. Now here we can read that we have like a reverb input compressor, a reverb wet compressor, a master compressor, and then we've got something called Delf Res, and pre-gain. We also have some weird switches here, one saying lock arp rate, lock reverb, and lock decay. And then there's this mystery knob here called DSP param halftime, and I'm too scared to actually tweak that one, so I'm gonna let you do it. Now, I've already tested this, and if you do any changes and you save a preset, then all of these changes gets saved with the preset. And so, even though it's hidden, it still ties in to the rest of the synthesizer. Awesome! Now, to close that page down, all you have to do is to press on the preset list up here, and then once more, and you're back to a normal view. In my preparations for making this video, I dialed up Matthew Fecher via Skype and had an interview with him. So I'm gonna sprinkle some bits and pieces from that interview throughout the video. Right, so I began by asking Matthew to just introduce himself and Audiokit.
Hey everybody, this is Matthew Fecher from Audiokit. I'm so excited to be here, and it's like a dream come true to be on this awesome YouTube channel. Audiokit has been going on for 5 years. It's a way for developers to write software that makes it easier to add audio to your apps. It's completely free and open source, and anyone could use the code, and anyone could add to the code. It was started by Ari Prohaska, and every single day of the year, he volunteers his time and writes more code, and he does this for no money, hardly any recognition. He's just a saint, and I think his goodwill and work ethic draw people in and encourage us all to create awesome stuff like this Audiokit Synth One. And I've been a core team member for 4 years now, and I try to do my best to write code that makes it easier for people to make music apps, in addition to these music apps that you see in the store like FM Player and Audiokit Synth One. So there's a whole lot going on behind the scenes besides just the apps in the App Store with Audiokit.
Right, so let's get into the normal stuff of this synthesizer. Now, the first time you open it up, you're greeted to this page. And what we're actually seeing here are 3 sections. 4, if you include this little bar up here with the web button and the preset selector. But we're going to have a look at the actual synthesizer, and I'm going to start with the keyboard. Right now, we can only see part of it, but we can see the full thing if we press show. Pressing hide hides it again. Very simple stuff. Up here, we have 2 distinct pages, but there are actually 6 pages to this. And it does get a bit confusing, at least for me, to switch around using these page selectors here on the side. But what I tend to do is I tend to keep the oscillator page always present up here on the upper half of the synthesizer, and I just simply switch around between the different pages down here. Okay, so we're going to begin by having a look at the oscillator page. Okay, so let's zoom into the oscillators here. Now, they're called DCOs, which probably stands for digitally controlled oscillators. You know, in analog hardware synthesizers, these would be called VCOs, meaning voltage controlled oscillators. Yes, that's some information we really don't need to consider right now. So, having a look at the oscillators, we can see that they both have 4 waveforms to choose between, but they're actually not 4 distinct waveforms. No, these can be intermixed with each other, blended by sweeping across here instead of just tapping, kind of like Xeon Synth, something I missed when I did that tutorial. And also layer, which I completely missed that you could do that with that synthesizer. So we can go from anything from a saw / pulse waveform to a pulse square waveform into a triangular waveform, which can be viewed in real time on the oscilloscope here. By the way, tapping on the oscilloscope here gives you a fuller view. It doesn't do anything to the sound, but it does make the oscilloscope look really nice. Now, there's also a sub-oscillator that you can drop down 2 whole octaves by activating this switch right here, and we can also switch the oscillator waveform into a square waveform. Next, we have the volume controls for oscillator 1 and 2, and then we have the mix, so we can mix between oscillator 1 and 2. Now, something cool with Synth One is that you actually get 2 types of synthesis with it, because, yes, it is a subtractive synthesizer, meaning it's using filters to subtract frequencies away from the sound, and that's exactly what subtractive synthesis is. However, there is actually a function here for FM synthesis, meaning frequency modulation, and we can find the box for that right here. And that's what's given it the ability to sound very 80s, Blade Runner-esque and yeah, all of that good stuff. You know, when talking to a developer, doing an interview, one of the things I'm always curious about is the challenges, the hard things, the toughest things that these developers have had to go through in order to produce an application that you and me, can then use to be creative with, to make music with. And so I asked Matthew the same thing, and this is what he said.
And a lot of iOS music programming is undocumented, so there's nowhere to really turn to. And so you just have to keep trying things and not just get discouraged. And you're like, there's no money involved. It's really, really hard. And I think the hardest thing is just to keep going day after day and pushing forward with the faith that eventually you're going to finish the app. And challenges that we're facing now include, making an AU v3 in a way that also allows other developers to make their apps AUV3. Because at AudioKit, we don't just want to build our own apps. We want to make things so that other people can add these same functionalities to their apps easily. So we're not just doing this for us, we're doing it for all the developers coming after us so they can have an easier time.
Next, we have the filter, where we have 3 different filter modes, so you can switch between low pass, band pass, and high pass. We also have keyboard mode with a glide function, and before I forget, there's of course a noise generator in here, and it's got its own volume knob right there. Lastly, we can find a global control where we can widen the output sound with, I think this is some kind of a Haas effect. We also have the ARP sequencer on-off button, and after that we also have a tempo setting. So why would we need a global tempo control inside Synth One? Well, that's because there's a lot of stuff inside Synth One that actually ties to a tempo, like the sequencer/arpeggiator page down here. So let's have a little quick look at the arpeggiator/sequencer page. So there are actually 2 on-off buttons for this. You have the one called ARP-Sec up in the global setting on the oscillator view, and then you have this switch over here, so you can use either of them to turn this entire function on or off. And remember, you can't use them both at the same time. No, you're gonna have to choose. You switch between the modes on this switch right here. Now, if you have it in arpeggiator mode, then you have a few more controls here. You have the interval control, the octave control, and the style. You know, the regular ones: up, up, down, down. Now, if we switch it over to sequencer, this is when this view becomes interesting. So you basically have up to 16 steps, but you can actually make this run in 15 steps or 7 steps by using the steps switch over here. Now, these types of sequencer views or interfaces are very easy to interact with. So you basically activate steps for playing by using these buttons down here. And then you set the pitch of each step by using the sliders, and you have 2 octaves to work with, 1 octave up and 1 octave down. That's 24 semitones, that's 24 semi-notes to work with, and it's all very straightforward. Talking to Matthew Fecher was a great experience. I found myself, well, how do I say this? I just respect him a lot. Just listen to what he said when I asked him, why are you doing this open source thing? Anyone can grab it, you're not getting paid. Why?
I think it's empathy, because I was never the best programmer, so people helped me. So I feel like it's our obligation to give back, because every app in the App Store is built with some form of open source. And, you know, if I can make it easier for the next person to empower themselves, to lift themselves up, to maybe they make an app that not only empowers music makers, but it empowers themselves to get out of poverty or some other aspiration that they could do through code. You know, I guess I'm not saving lives or anything, but bringing synthesis to people, that has its own merits, I suppose. My way to give back.
You know, personally, I don't get that excited over arpeggiators, but when you have a powerful scaling mode, or tuning mode as it's called inside Synth One, then it gets really interesting. And so the next page is the tuning page, where we can find a whole slew of various chord modes and stuff, and it's got this really beautiful view here of the notes being played when you actually use it as a nice touch to this synthesizer. Now, it won't change out the keyboard, but it will play in that scale. And this is perfect for people like myself. I'm not really a good keyboard player, so a mode like this is just gold. Let's take a little pause here and think about this. What we've seen so far and what's coming is all included inside a professional, very good sounding, free synthesizer. It's also open source, so any other developer can grab the code and use it to make their own stuff. Think about it. All of this is free. There's no payment plan, no nothing. And it's on the App Store. Apple's App Store.
Oh, you like this bit?
Yes.
We're gonna take this bit.
Why?
Oh, you want this bit? Here, you can have it back.
So let's have a quick look at the envelope page. Here we can find the amplitude envelope, which controls the volume output of the entire synth. And then we also have the filter envelope here to the left, which controls the filter. And they are both ADS-R envelopes, meaning they both have attack, decay, sustain, and release controls. Now, the filter envelope is a bit different because it actually has an envelope amount knob, and this is simply here to set the strength of the envelope signal being sent to the filter cutoff. All in all, it's very, very straightforward, and you don't really have to think about what you're doing here. Now, if we jump to the next page, we can find a Oscillator type touchpad. To the right here, we can control the filter resonance and filter cutoff, and to the left, we can control the LFO amplitude and LFO rate. Doesn't really need more explanation than that. And so we get to the final page inside Synth One, which is the FX page. However, this one is holding more than FX, it's also holding the modulation sources LFO1 and LFO2. Now, the first thing I want you to notice is this little button here called Tempo Sync here in the middle. Remember that Synth One has a global tempo control. Well, the tempo setting is not only being used for the arpeggiator/sequencer, no, it's also being used by the FX and the LFOs. So when you activate this button, then you're effectively syncing stuff like the delay time and the rate for the auto panning module. And at the same time, you're also syncing the rates of the LFOs. Now, apart from the delay module and the auto panning module, we can also find a bit crusher, a phaser, and a reverb module. And I want you to notice something here. Look at this. The reverb module has a low cut filter mode. Yes. You see, when Matthew wrote to me, he wrote that they put a low cut filter in the reverb module because I always complain about reverbs inside synthesizers not having this function. Something that I absolutely loathe because it always makes the reverb sound muddy and rumbly, and I want to be able to filter off those lower frequencies inside my reverb tail. And so they made sure that I had nothing to complain about, and I don't, because the reverb sounds great, and I love it that you're able to filter it off. Thank you so much, all of you who worked with Synth One. I mean, this is just, yeah, I love this. From one thing to another, personally, I find it very hard to collaborate with people because I've got a really huge ego. Now, there might be a lot of you out there who might recognize yourselves in that, trying to be in control of everything, and sometimes it ends up being messy, but it just feels good knowing exactly where everything is and what everything is doing and, stuff like that. Yeah, that made me wonder about what things are actually like when you're doing something like Matthew, Ari, and all of the other developers out there, doing this thing, collaborating with loads of people, and now anyone can just grab the code and do what they want with it. I had to ask Matthew how he felt about that, and so this is what he said.
An important thing for a good open source developer is to not let your ego get in the way. And so I'm completely fine with stepping aside and letting the community take this wherever they want to take it and letting go. I've put my heart and soul into it for the last 2 years, as have, dozens of other developers. But we're like, hey, this belongs to the people now. Do what you want with it.
Now let's have a look at the left side here and the LFO modules. Each of the LFO modules have 4 different waveforms to choose between. Now these aren't like the oscillator waveforms where you can mix the different waveforms. These are set waveforms. So you have a sine waveform, a square waveform, a ramp up and a ramp down saw waveform. Next we find the rate knob and the amp knob. And the amp knob is basically just controlling the strength of the actual modulation signal. What can be a bit confusing is the matrix down here, but it's really straightforward, so stick with me here. So here we see a list of the various things that we can modulate using the LFOs, and we can see that there are 2 boxes on both sides of each item that we can modulate. And so if you want to use LFO 1 to modulate, for instance, the cutoff, then you simply press on the first box and make sure that that lights up. And if you want to use LFO 2, then we can just press the box again to turn off LFO 1 and press the other box, and now we're using LFO 2. But the cool thing with this is that you can use both LFOs at once to modulate the same thing. And that can create some really interesting textures. And that's really all you need to know about Synth One by Audiokit in order to get started creating some awesome, amazing sounds. And when it comes to the sounds, as we've been able to hear throughout this entire haQ episode, there are some great sounds inside Synth One. So you don't really have to, get into the synthesis and make your own if you don't want to do that. No, Synth One already has you covered with great sounds from a lot of really generous people who have been contributing patches to this thing. I've mostly been playing patches from Stuart Kilbride, aka Red Sky Lullaby, who is famous for making great atmospheric patches for other synthesizers. This guy always delivers the best of the best when it comes to great sounds. And I've also been playing a lot from Dean Daughters, aka Electronic Sounds. The guy even made a patch for me. It says so here. Hello, Dean, and thank you so much for that patch. It sounds absolutely awesome. That's some great bass there. He's got his own YouTube channel, and I'll link to it down in the description, where you can also find a link for Synth One. I do recommend that you go get the synthesizer. It's free, and for any developers out there watching this, then Matthew Fecher from Audiokit has a message for you.
Yeah, for those listening, you're never too old to start learning the program. We talk to people all the time that are writing their first music apps. For those listening, Andy Bull from Layer, he was in his 60s writing his very first iOS synth, and it was hugely popular, so you're never too old. The code is kind of complicated. It's not the easiest code in the world to figure out, but we do have some simpler examples on the Audiokit website to kind of work your way up to it. And who knows, by this time next year, maybe the code will be really easy to understand so that it's easier for anyone to kind of make their own cool synthesizer like this.
So if you like reviews like this, if you like tutorials, good demos, deep stuff, because that's what I make. I take a long time making my stuff. I don't post that often, but I do post once a week, and I make sure that each video is interesting and contains more than just a quick demo of something. I want to be able to offer more than just a tutorial or just a demo or just a review. And sometimes I take time away to explain certain concepts and other stuff. Take the plate reverb from Audio Damage. When I made that video, inside that video you can also find a great description of what a plate reverb really is, a hardware one, and what it looks like and stuff like that. So I spend a lot of time trying to make my episodes into shows and make them be as interesting as possible, which means that it takes a lot of time for me to make my videos. That's a bad thing here on YouTube, because after 4 days, if I don't post for 4 days, it's as if my videos aren't being recommended, and I can see views and interactions just drop like crazy. It didn't used to be like this back in the days, you know, take a year ago or 2 years ago. Now with the algorithms being changed inside YouTube, it's really hard. So whenever you watch one of my videos, don't forget to press that thumbs up, because that really helps with the ratings here on YouTube. And share my videos if you find anyone who might benefit from one of my videos, of course. Now, if you want to help in securing the future for this channel, I really do need your help. Then why not consider joining up on Patreon, like many of my awesome patrons have already done. Weirdest sentence ever, but that's how I say it basically. And if you don't want to do Patreon, then you can use the PayPal me link to do a one-off donation. That's also helpful. If you don't want to do that, then buying apps through my links in the description also helps me, because I'm an Apple affiliate, and so I earn a percentage of the app price that you pay. It's basically Apple paying bloggers, video makers for selling apps for them. If you don't want to do any of that, then you can also go to my Bandcamp, where you can find some of my music. If you find something you like, you can buy that. If you don't want to do any of that, then and that's basically it. So thank you so much for watching, and all comments and ratings are very much appreciated. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it.